Let's have a word. I am Joseph. This is Input English. For those of you joining us for the first time, Input English is a channel for comprehensible input for people around the world who want to improve their listening comprehension and their speaking ability in English. So I started out with the phrase, let's have a word. Have a word is a phrase in English that is used commonly to refer to a discussion. It's not a single word, it is a discussion. If you have a word with someone, you may be reprimanding them. You may be telling them to correct their behavior. You may be criticizing them for what they did. Or you may just be giving them information. Today, we're using let's have a word to refer to a discussion, a talk, an informal discussion. I anticipate a series of videos entitled Let's Have a Word, and I would like these videos to really be an invitation into the playground of the English language. Certainly we want to learn this language and we want to be able to use it, but we certainly want to enjoy ourselves while we learn this language. That enhances the learning. In previous videos, I have several times referred to the English language as a mess. A beautiful mess, but a mess nonetheless, because it is cobbled together from so many sources. Latin, Old English, Middle English, Old Norse, French, and a lot of words have been brought into English from other sources. So when I say it's a mess, that is not disrespectful, it's a metaphor. I'm simply pointing out that English is a patchwork or an amalgamation. Now there's a good word, amalgamation. That is a blending of different things to make up a whole. The first time I ever heard the word amalgamation was its root word amalgam. And I learned that in a dentist's office because dentists historically needed to fill teeth, but this was before modern plastics and composites had been developed. So they were stuck with traditional methods of filling cavities in teeth. One of those methods was to use amalgam. Amalgam was made when a metal was mixed with mercury in the right ratio so that it created a putty that could be molded into a cavity and then harden enough that it would stay put and function as a new surface for that tooth. Amalgam is no longer used in dentistry, but it certainly was when I was a child. In financial and legal settings, amalgamation is used to describe the blending of companies or activities to unite them into a bigger unit. So let's accept that English is an amalgamation or a blending of words, expressions, and traditions from various languages, and let's try to adapt to that and understand it a little bit better. The other day I stated that I would chafe at being an authority figure on this channel. A question came in, what's this word chafe? And there is a story to go with that word. As I recall, it goes back to Middle English, maybe further back than that. And it originally meant to warm like this. As you rub your hands together, you warm them. And so this was chafing or warming your hands, but then the meaning changed to refer primarily to the rubbing and then the wear from the rubbing. And so if you have an object, or perhaps your skin, that has been rubbed and damaged a little bit, then that is chafing. Now, the word chafing got a big boost from its time in nautical service. The word chafing was used a lot in nautical settings to refer to wear of sails as they rubbed against other structures or against lines, and also wear of the rope, the lines on the ship, as that rope rubbed against another structure and was damaged. We get a lot of expressions in English that came to us from nautical origins. But let's don't start there. Let's start with a fun expression, because what I'm trying to do is give you the inside skinny on this topic. Well, what is the inside skinny? Well, that's an expression that developed over the years, and the skinny, when you talk about that, it was the facts, the unadorned, simple facts. Maybe facts that other people don't know. The salient facts, the important facts, things you need to know would be referred to as the skinny. The inside skinny lets you know that this is information that other people don't know. The expression skinny has been in English for a long time, but it probably got a big boost during World War II from members of the armed forces, the Army, soldiers. And it may indeed have gotten even more of a boost from Hollywood as films were made depicting the activities of World War II. All of that said, it's fairly common for somebody to want to know the inside skinny about something. So my plan here is to give you some stories about how this all fits together and stay away from lists of vocabulary that people might be tempted to try to memorize. This is still comprehensible input. It's just that the stories we're discussing today are about words and expressions and the development of the language. A lot of the development of English had to do with military activity and conquests. When the Romans invaded the British Isles, they brought Latin with them, and they left a good bit of it behind. When a large segment of England was occupied by Vikings, they left a lot of expressions and words behind in the British Isles that originated with Old Norse. Now, you can be suspicious of words that may have come from Old Norse if you see a word that starts with an SK, like skull, or with TH, like this, the, there, they. If you look at the English conjugation of the verb to be, you can see that it's all over the place. It's crazy. I am, you are. Many of these words came from Old Norse. So if you say they are, you're using English words that came from Old Norse. So I don't want you to memorize all this. I'm giving you clues that when you see things, you can notice them, and instead of scratching your head in puzzlement, you can say, oh yes, I've heard about that, and move on. Another big invasion of the British Isles occurred in 1066 when the Normans invaded England and occupied it for a long time. The government in England was replaced with a French-speaking government, and so educated people were speaking French, and the rest of the population was speaking the English of the time, and these mixed together. A lot of French words came into English after the Norman invasion. Now, again, I can give you a hint so that when you see words, you can be suspicious that they may have come originally from French. There are prefixes, that is, fragments of words that are added to the front of a word that suggests a French origin. The one that comes to mind is pre, P-R-E. If you see that in front of a word, that pre came from French. On the other end of the word, the end of the word, there are a lot of endings that are typical of French words that came into English. If you see a word that ends in A-B-L-E, able, like possible, think French. A-T-E, think French. I-V-E, descriptive, think French. M-E-N-T, pavement, think French. T-U-R-E. Now my take on that is it's been changed as it came into English, and that in French it would have been T-E-U-R. If you see a word ending in I-O-N, I-T-Y, or O-U-S, think French. I give you this list of endings, not that you need to do anything about them. I'm trying to foster people noticing things. So if you see these endings, it just gives you the insight that the English language has been cobbled together from many sources, and that with that ending, you're looking at a word that we got originally from the French. Now, there are entire words and phrases that we get from French that we didn't change at all. Déjà vu. People use that term because we imported that phrase into English. There are two French words that are used in aviation every day, unchanged. Fuselage, empennage. The fuselage is the body of an airplane. And the empennage, the tail structures, that is the vertical stabilizer, the horizontal stabilizer, and the control surfaces of the airplane in the tail. Empennage refers to the application of feathers to the tail end of an arrow. And in fact, in aviation, if we want to casually refer to the tail of the airplane, the empennage, we might just call it the tail feathers. So where else do we get expressions into English that add to the richness of the language? If I hear an expression in English, one of the questions I may ask myself is, could that be biblical? Now, I'm not a Bible scholar, so I'm not able to identify things readily myself, but a lot of expressions in the English language originated with biblical references. The next question I ask myself is, could it be Shakespeare? Shakespeare invented at least 1,500 words that are currently in the English language, and a lot of phrases from Shakespeare survive to this day. Take, for example, the better part of valor is discretion. Sometimes you'll hear that in a shortened, the better part of valor. So where did that come from? Well, that came right out of Henry IV. The speaker was Falstaff. This reference of the better part of valor coming from Shakespeare actually has roots in an English translation of the Bible, specifically Proverbs, that antedated Shakespeare's use of the term. It's not important to memorize this. It's important to appreciate the forces that are at work in building this complicated language. Another source of many phrases in the current English language is nautical terminology. If you look at history, English-speaking countries were seafarers. England had no choice. It was a relatively small island, And so in order to build its empire and be successful, they took to the seas. They were not the only country that did that, but their nautical history had a big influence on the development of the language. North America was discovered and developed with seafaring as an important part of its history as well. It is not my goal to list large numbers of nautical terms that have infiltrated the English language, but I would like to give you an example. You may hear someone say, by and large, and if someone says by and large, they mean in general or for the most part, usually. But that isn't where the phrase started. It was a nautical term. So if you are sailing a ship by the wind, you're sailing more toward the wind, not directly into it. A sailing ship can't do that, but they can fall off the wind a few degrees and sail very efficiently by the wind. So that means upwind. And then large, if you're sailing a ship with the wind, you tend to put up all your sails or a lot of sails. And so if you see a ship sailing downwind, you see a lot of sails because as the ship picks up speed, they need more and more sail to pick up more wind because they're going in the same direction as the wind. So if you say by and large, that means upwind and downwind. And what it really means is under most circumstances, in most settings. And that distills down to generally. Going forward with the Let's Have a Word series, I anticipate collecting interesting words and phrases with their stories so that I can tell you the story of these expressions and give you a solid context so that they mean more to you than just a word on a list. I hope you enjoyed this approach, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.